What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Still Curtain podcast. I'm your host, Tommy Jaggi, editor of StillCurtain.com, and joining me, as always, is Still Curtain co-editor, contributor, Shayne Kubas. Shayne, we've got a preseason game to talk about, finally. It's been a long time coming here, and I'm one of those degenerates that watched the game twice. The broadcast view, I've watched it 3 times in the All-22 film, so I've got a pretty good grasp on it at this point, Shayne.
Yeah, we both are, I didn't watch that many times in the L-22, but I did watch other preseason games too, because I even do that, despite only really needing to do it for the Steelers realistically. But yeah, we as much as this isn't real football technically quite yet, it's close enough that we're going to sit down and watch it. So.
Yeah, for sure. You can tell our excitement, I think, from this. We're also going to talk today camp winners and losers. Steelers training camp has wrapped up officially. So our own Josh Yorish was down there. He shared some nuggets with us, as well as kind of just gathering from what we've heard, all the beat writers, all the reporters, all the notes from camp, if you will. We're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about Cam Heyward's contract drama that seems to be stealing the show here as of late. And we'll wrap up today by talking about the biggest storylines to watch. Steelers versus Buccaneers this Saturday night for their second preseason game, the one where we should see most of the starters playing. And this is probably the only time they'll play. They'll get that third week off, and then hopefully smooth sailing. Nobody gets injured until the start of the season. Shayne, let's backtrack now, and let's talk about the Steelers game against the Jaguars. What are your overall thoughts on this game? I know that most of the starters were sitting out. The offensive line did not, though. However, they played 14 snaps together as a unit before seeing the bench, and their night was over with. I thought they did a pretty good job overall, but most of the starters didn't play in this game. Peyton Wilson was out there. A few defenders like Derek Harmon played quite a while into the game. He needed those reps. Go ahead and start off with the positive notes that you took away from the game.
I think specifically the passing game was really good throughout the game, both with Mason in there initially, and then Skylar Thompson, we'll talk more about him a little bit later, had a really phenomenal game, especially by, Skylar Thompson's standards, no offense to him. It's been a rough going for him when he's played real reps in the NFL up to this point. He was 7th round pick back in 2022, so it's kind of hard to have super high expectations for him, although Brock Purdy was also a 7th round pick in 2022, so take that how you will. But he looked really good. I think the receivers played very well up and down the depth chart. And weirdly enough, that was the thing we were most kind of concerned about, at this point in the season, is what does this receiver depth chart kind of look like as you get past really DK Metcalf and maybe Calvin Austin, depending on how much you like him at this point. And they really stepped up and had a really phenomenal game across the board.
Yeah, go back to Skylar Thompson here. Everybody's up in arms with the Shedeur Sanders performance in his first preseason game, and he made some really nice throws.
He did. But
there are a lot of quarterbacks who performed well. Skylar Thompson was one of them. Tanner McGee was another. If you the Eagles there. Good. With Skylar Thompson, 20 of 28, 233 yards, 3 touchdowns, no picks, 8.3 yards an attempt. That's 132 pass rating. And by the way, Mason Rudolph before him, 9 of 10, 84 yards and a touchdown before his night was finished.
Only completion was a drop from Caleb Johnson too, by the way.
That's right. That was it was a blatant drop on the first drive. He had 147 passer rating. I pulled up the passer rating calculator there. He was 7 of 7 for 70 yards in that opening drive touchdown. And so hard to ask for more from what you saw from him. Again, it's the preseason. I want to preface by saying we saw Kenny Pickett throw a perfect 158.3 passer rating in the 2023 preseason. He went on to do zilch that year in his second season with the Steelers. So it doesn't always translate, but it's worth mentioning his performance. I thought the offensive line, Shayne, I want to mention them specifically because I cut up the All-22 film. I did the offensive line as unit. I just posted Troy Fautanu's snaps specifically. If you want to check those out, it's on my X account. Go look at my highlights on there. But the offensive line, I thought, played really well in this game. And it's worth mentioning that the Jaguars played their starters. They had 2 top 7 edge rushers out there, and Trayvon Walker, the former #1 overall pick in the draft, and Josh Hines-Allen, who Broderick Jones was going up against on the other side of the offensive line. And I thought they did a pretty good job. It's exactly the type of performance that you were hoping to see from Jones and Fautanu, 2 former first-round picks.
Yeah, and I think the key thing is that they weren't losing one much at all and two quickly. Because I think the key thing for this season with Aaron Rodgers now in a quarterback is he's not going to hold the ball like he used to as much. He's not going to be a guy that has a time to throw like over 3 seconds very often, if at all. You just can't lose immediately and give him an opportunity to go through his reads quickly, get the ball out. That's what the offense in the passing game is going to be most of the time. Now we'll get the play action shots and more long developing stuff, but in play action, you don't have to pass protect in the same way you will in true pass sets like they will in the short passing game and the quick passing game. So if they just don't lose quickly and they don't show too many signs of being a group that loses quickly, I think that's good enough. And I think they showed at least that in the first preseason game.
Yeah, for sure. And anybody that is looking into the preseason PFF grades, I would caution against that. Your grade starts at a certain point and then it goes higher or lower. And when you only play 14 snaps, you're not going to have enough opportunities to get that grade where it needs to be. So I would take those very much with a grain of salt, specifically the offensive linemen or guys that play a few snaps in the game. And this is not to say that the interior offensive line didn't do well. They did awesome. Like Zach Frazier, the combination of Frazier and McCormick, like I think that there's a chance that you could be looking at something really good there. Maybe maybe not Marquise Pouncey, David DeCastro, but these guys have been impressive late. They were impressive late in the 2024 season. They've continued that. Again, one preseason opener. It did come against Jacksonville starters, but take it for what you will. The offensive line played well. I thought Roman Wilson had a really good series. He only played 9 snaps in this game, but he accounted for 22% of the total offensive looks while he was out there and 37% of the team's yards before he was pulled from the game. And it was only 2 receptions for 24 yards. So again, you can't prorate this over the game. It's too small of a sample, but on those 2 receptions, the first one was a deep dig over the middle of the field, deep in-breaking route against Tyson Campbell, who's a respectable cornerback, got some separation on him and drew the flag and caught the ball through the contact there. And then he had another screen pass to the left flats where he took it 5 yards after the catch. Nothing spectacular, but this is exactly what you want to see. 2 targets, 2 receptions, help drive the ball down and effortlessly help his team score on the first drive.
Yeah, I think the key thing, too, to remember with him is he only got 9 snaps. And I think in a preseason game where you're not playing your starters a ton and you're missing DK Metcalf and Calvin Austin, like the fact that they didn't need to see more from him or they felt like they didn't need more from him tells you a lot about probably where he's at in the pecking order right now. If he was farther down the depth chart, as far down as it looked like with the initial depth chart, right? Which, again, we said it last week, like, there's no guarantee that depth chart is even remotely close to accurate outside of the ones that are obvious, right? Like obviously Aaron Rodgers starting quarterback and stuff like that. But as far as guys down the depth chart, you don't really know until you get to see them in the preseason and you look at what they're doing in training camp. I think he's clearly in that top 3 receiver rotation right now with Metcalf and Austin when he's back. So that's another key thing is a win for him in that game.
Yeah, absolutely. In 11 personnel, he's been the guy operating as the opposite outside receiver of DK. And so that's noteworthy. And the fact that you pull him so early from the game, this is a great sign. Like it's not a bad thing. If he was not performing well, you leave him in there and make him prove it. Yeah. And that brings me to another player that I have to mention in this week 1 preseason notes. And that's YA Black, a guy that I did not think I would be talking about in this facet this early on, a 5th round pick. A guy who was deemed an on-value pick. In fact, the Steelers, his consensus board value, according to Marcus Mosier's NFL draft expert consensus board, lined up almost exactly with where the Steelers were picking, like pick 145, whatever that was. But he has been impressive in the preseason, and now his training camp, and then he goes into his first preseason game, and he gets 10 snaps out there because he had shown enough. And Brian Baldinger did a Baldy's breakdown of him because he was so impressed by the rookie, cut up 5 of his 10 snaps, showed the power, his ability to get lateral and make plays at the line of scrimmage. What did you make of his performance here?
I think he looked exactly like what you hope a player in his mold looks like, where he is this bigger bodied, powerful player that's going to try to control the line of scrimmage when he's out there, right? And that's why even if I don't like that he's kind of being put at a defensive end position in this defense, I think he's strong enough and he has enough lateral ability to make that work. But I think ultimately you hope he can become like a true run defending nose tackle type of player, right? Because that's, again, what his skill set tells you he's going to be best at. And I think even in limited action, we saw that that is going to be his role, whether he's lined up at the nose, like I said, or 3-tech, 5-tech, whatever. He's going to be out there to body the dude in front of him and take up gaps and not let running lanes open up where he's at. So, and he showed that early on. He showed it in training camp. If he keeps doing it, he is going to probably be the first guy off the bench when you're talking about him, Benton, Heyward, and Harmon are probably going to be the top 4 guys in this rotation if he keeps it up.
Yeah, I mean, he was impressive, and I think that in a sense, in a little bit, he kind of stole the show away from Derek Harmon, the first-round pick. That's not to say that Harmon had a bad game. I thought he showed his flashes as a pass rusher, but on fewer snaps. And it was interesting also that the Steelers they had seen enough from Black earlier than Harmon, who Harmon played 3 times the amount of snaps that Black played. But I thought the performance was very strong overall, and we'll see if he can repeat that. Any other notes that you want to get to, Shayne, before we move on to our next topic?
I will say, even though, again, I don't think Harmon played bad by any means, I was a little disappointed with the front on defense in this game. And obviously you're missing pretty much everyone of note, that especially at edge. Like, you had Jack Sawyer out there who PFF had him with 4 pressures. I saw 2, and one of them is
the edge pressure was bad.
Yeah, I saw 2 that I thought were notable, and one was very late in the game when they were passing to try to win, and he's going up against whoever's out there. And then the other one was an unblocked pressure that was a touchdown because he couldn't get there in time. So, like, I just, again, the edge rusher production, which, again, you have to remember, no one of note was out there. It's pretty much just him and DeMarvin Leal for the most part. And I think Welshoff was out there too. But it just, again, it wasn't very good, but you kind of expect that with who's out there, even against some first stringers originally and then backups. So.
Yeah, and that's a guy we hope to see more of. And I want to talk about Caleb Johnson as well, real quickly, because some people are maybe blowing that performance out of proportion a little bit, saying he wasn't efficient in this game. He didn't really show anything. Well, I mean, we know full well, Shayne, that running backs' performances are tied to what's available. And I did break down the splits. I watched the game, and then you look at the game log afterwards. When he was playing, when Caleb Johnson was playing behind the starting offensive line, he averaged 4.0 yards a carry. When the starting line went out and Johnson played the rest of the game, I believe that was 5 extra carries there. 5 of his 8 carries came with the backup offensive line. That was 1.2 yards per carry. And you could see that, like, he's getting hit behind the line of scrimmage. There's not a lot you can do with that. And so in an 8 carry sample, 20 yards, it's not good on paper. It was an unspectacular performance overall. He had a blatantly bad drop. He's got to be better in that facet of the game as well. But as a runner, like, I'm not going to come down too hard on him on an 8 carry sample.
No, and I think, even I did an article about him after the game. Like, the hype train kind of got slowed down with him, and I don't think it's because he was bad per se, but I think people were hoping that you were going to get a big play out of him in his first action, or that he was going to kind of have that standout moment. He just didn't get it really, and it's not necessarily, like I said, his fault, like you said as well. It didn't work out. And again, with a running back in a few carries, there's a lot of running backs in the NFL who, if you just took like a couple carries out of every game, would average like 3 yards a carry. Like, and it's because big chunk plays are important, and a lot of the best running backs in the league thrive on those. Look at what Saquon Barkley did last year for the Eagles. Yes, he was efficient overall. Of course, you have to be when you're getting over 2,000 yards, but you also had to look at his numbers in terms of his long plays. Almost nobody has ever had as many big chunk plays in the ground game as he had last year, and that's why he ultimately finished as high as he did. Not just in terms of the all-time rushing record for a season, but among players that year, like yards per carry, all that good stuff, because of those chunk plays. And Caleb just didn't get one in this game.
Yeah, I know. Shayne, I want to talk really quick about Max Hurlman, a guy that kind of got the attention of people. If you weren't following along with training camp, you probably never even heard the name before. A guy that's played some wide receiver, some running back in the past, wearing the number 34 out there, 2 receptions. What do you have? 29 yards. Got the touchdown, did the backflip afterwards. A guy that brings some versatility. So just a name to throw out there to watch. Very, very long shot to make this team. I think the path is incredibly daunting still. Was there anybody else that struck you positive or negative in this game, Shayne?
I wanted to double check the name because some of these guys are obviously pretty far down the depth chart. But the receiver who caught the other touchdown late in the game for us, he flashed a couple times. He had the 2 catches for 55 yards.
Oh, Keyshawn Williams.
Yeah, that's right. I couldn't remember if Deshaun Williams or Keyshawn Williams. He's got some juice, man. Like you could tell that from an athletic perspective, he's certainly an NFL athlete now. Obviously, not super productive in college in Indiana when he was there. So like, we'll see if there's anything to him. But he did flash in the moments, and that goes back to what I said about this entire receiving depth chart. Like you kind of go across the board. Like Scotty Miller had a good game. We obviously talked about Roman Wilson starting things off well. A lot of these guys played well down the depth chart. So it's going to be interesting to see how this ultimately shakes out, and also who ends up on the practice squad and kind of the first guy in if something happens to someone.
Yeah, for sure. Lou Nichols was another at running back.
Yeah,
5.2 yards.
Only one who really was productive at the running back.
He was, and he showed some wiggle and some juice there. So keep an eye on him. My 53-man roster prediction came out this morning. If you want to check that out, I give my thought on every positional breakdown. We'll do one of those, Shayne, on this show after the preseason wraps up, probably.
Yeah.
And we'll give our final thoughts there. But I think it's just so hard because I think that running back group is already set in stone. I think those top 3 guys, and I would be shocked if they kept the 4th because it's not what the talent dictates you should do. You should go elsewhere with the talent, not make an exception for a 4th running back this year.
Yeah.
All right, Shayne, let's move on. I want to talk about Cam Heyward now, and I see some chats popping in here about Cam, this contract situation, this drama that's going on, something that we didn't think that we would have to be talking about right now. Because he signed a contract extension just last offseason. And so if you weren't aware, I want to read the quotes from Cam Heyward. He spoke to the media recently, and this is what he had to say. I'm looking for my contract to be addressed. Honestly, I'm looking to be valued. I know what to bring to the team, what I'm capable of on and off the field. It's hard for me year after year. I had to really justify playing at that number that I'm playing at. And Shayne, he's clearly disgruntled with the contract situation. Now, I want to approach it from his perspective first, and then we'll look at this the other way. So here are the details. Here's what's going on. Right now, Cam is among interior defenders quite far down on the list.
Yes.
And to show you how in terms of average annual earnings, he's below players like Javon Kinlaw, Shayne, who we've talked about him before on this podcast, Tershawn Thornton, Jonathan Allen in his old age, Javon Hargrave, former Steeler. Like Cam Heyward is coming off an all-pro season. He was a first-team all-pro last year. He had a bounce-back year. He is, I mean, you're talking closer to the 20th paid interior defensive lineman than the guys at the top of the list, despite the season that he had. Now, counterpoint here, Shayne, he signed a contract last offseason. His agent was apparently, he had to have been present for this. It wasn't unbeknown to Cam Heyward, and he just got duped into signing it. Like, the Steelers were taking a risk, and I think that this is the thing that we need to address. Cam Heyward was coming off a season where he injured his groin. He played 11 games, and in those games, he had 2 sacks and 3 TFLs. The Steelers were taking a risk signing a 35-year-old player to a multi-year contract extension. It was a 2-year, $29 million deal, which at the time, and we were looking at the season he was coming off of, didn't make a Pro Bowl, didn't earn even second-team All-Pro votes. It was kind of a down year, and yes, he played through injuries. I give him credit for doing that. But the Steelers took a risk on him, and now that it's paying off for them, they're kind of getting punished because Cam's going back to them saying, hey, well, I outplayed this. Shayne, it reminds me of a quote from a movie. I don't know if you've seen it or not. Mr. Deeds. Have you ever seen Mr. Deeds? Yeah. That scene where the star player comes into the front office, bursts in there, and essentially it goes down where Adam Sandler's like, well, if you don't play well, can we renegotiate and pay you less? And he's essentially like, no. So it's like, we're finding ourselves in this situation. You can't renegotiate and pay someone less when they don't perform well. So why should we go and renegotiate the contract that you just signed a multi-year deal you just signed last offseason? I can see it from both perspectives. I don't want to be bullish one way or the other. Cam absolutely has outplayed his contract There are zero questions about that.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, he signed this deal when it did not have language in there to say, if I make an all-pro, if I do this, there was none of that in there. He signed the contract. Shayne, where do you fall on this? Because there are people like hard on both sides of the fence here.
So I'm going to, before I give my like overall like personal thought on it, I just want to kind of go at it from the two things that I think are very clear here. One, like you said, there is no doubt that Cam Heyward is worth far more money than he's going to be paid by the Steelers this year if he is paid what he's set to be paid this year. There's no doubt about that. I think it's you can make a really strong argument that among guys who are not on rookie contracts, he might have been the best bargain in the NFL last year, just based on a production versus how much he's paid. Very easily, especially because of the position that he plays, right? Where it's one of those top 5 positions in the league in terms of value. That is absolutely unequivocally true. It is also true that Cam's best probably path last year would have been to play out his contract, knowing that he was healthy, knowing that he thought he was going to be this player again, and forcing the Steelers to have to pay him this offseason to bring him back and pay him a lot more than he'd be making. Now, granted, he's an older player. They didn't want to make that risk be too heavy. He probably didn't want to take that risk on either of like, what if I am not the same guy, right? He didn't want to worry about that, and I get that. So I do understand why the Steelers don't want to do this, but I also understand why Cam wants to do this because he's not getting another contract after this one. If they don't amend this one to something more like what he wants, that's probably it. He's not getting another contract past the couple of years he has left. So I understand why he's holding out for that. Ultimately, for me, and this is just the opinion I have across the board, like not just the Steelers, everywhere, I will, every single time a player is in a contract negotiation, I will always side with the player. It does not matter the situation. I'm one of those people where the owners, they have the money, they have the say in things. If the player wants more money, I think they can ask for it. I do not care, especially if they are earning it, right? So I'm always going to side with the player in that situation, including Cam in this situation. However, I do think he did make a mistake by handling the contract situation the way he did and asking for more years and more money, but not as much money as he could make if he had a great season and could renegotiate from there. So he put himself in a rough position. I ultimately think that it's going to get figured out in some way. But I do think he tried to be like the good soldier and take a deal that he didn't really want, but it got him back on the field and got him some security. And now he wants to, now that he's proven to be the player he was again, he wants to cash in on that one more time.
Yeah, Shayne, you laid that out really well. And I think that he made that mistake inking a deal he shouldn't have ever made because of his previous reputation of he should have bet on himself. He should have waited. We know the salary cap goes up every year. We knew that at the time was not market value, and Steelers fans had to have been pleased with what they were getting. And you, like you said, I mean, he was one of the best bargains in the league last year. We've got a chat here. What's the asking price for Cam and Chris Boswell? Well, let's look at the contract numbers here compared to top of the market value. So Cam, in terms of average annual salary, average annual earnings he's at $14.5 million. To put that into perspective, Shayne, another interior defender who signed a contract last year, Chris Jones, who's younger than Cam, and and he's been phenomenal. But Chris Jones is making $31.75 million annually. That is more than double a Cam Heyward. So would you rather have 2 Cams or a Chris Jones? Like, you can understand where he's coming from. Milton Williams, who was it was a backup half the time for the Eagles and came off the bench as a rotational defensive tackle, he made $26 million per year in free agency. Zach Allen got paid this offseason, $25.5. Matabuke got paid $24.5. Ali McNeil's making $24 million. Derek Brown's making $24 million, and he can't stay healthy. Quinnen Williams making $24 million. Jeffrey Simmons at $23.5. DeForest Buckner, $23 million. Cam's not anywhere close to these numbers, despite coming off a first-team All-Pro season. So I 100% see where he's coming from. At the same time, I do feel that he is the one that made that mistake by inking a deal he never should have made. But a contract is a binding agreement between two parties that he's going back on right now. And again, I can see it both ways. I truly can see it both ways. I think this ultimately gets resolved, although the latest reports suggest the Steelers are not willing to budge right now. Omar Khan doesn't want to talk about it. People try bringing it up to him, doesn't want to talk about it right now. They think that they got a great deal, and it kind of stinks for Pittsburgh's front office because they thought that they had just – I mean, they took a gamble, like I said, on Cam. They didn't know. Maybe he would have been toast. Like maybe he has one big injury, and they blow some money on his last contract. Maybe it looked like Ben's contract towards the end of his career where they didn't get their payout of it, but they took a gamble. The gamble paid out for them, and now they're kind of getting punished because Cam is even threatening to sit out games. And for what it's worth, his game checks are small. His base salary is only $1.3 million because the rest of it has been converted to a signing bonus and has been prorated to guaranteed money already. He can do that. If Cam really wants to, he can sit out and make the Steelers suffer until they get him money. And so it's a tough situation that Pittsburgh's going into. I don't know, Shayne, how do you think, well, I want to answer the question first, Ken's question here. What is the asking price? Cam did not come out and say, but based on the top of the market deals, he's not going to get what Chris Jones is getting. That's too much. Chris Jones is a younger player, arguably even better than Cam, and Cam has been phenomenal. I think if he can get anywhere in the ballpark of that 23 to 25 million per year, he'd be more than satisfied with that because that still puts him like second to fourth-ish range in the NFL. But will the Steelers be willing to oblige? How do you see this getting resolved?
Yeah, I mean, again, the asking price, if we're being honest about it, should be in that 25 to 28-ish million dollars a year, just going off of like his value to the team and where the contracts are in the NFL. He won't get that because it's too far away from the number he's already making. I think that he should be shooting for upwards of 20 million is what he actually getting paid. So added money to that deal. And I think that would at least satisfy him for the most part and make him feel like he's being valued mostly properly, especially factoring in the age situation. I don't really know how it gets resolved. I don't know if it's going to come down to the fact that Cam doesn't want to miss games for this, even if he says he's willing to, or if the Steelers are going to throw him a bone and be like, hey, we're going to add, X amount of money onto the deal this year and whatever, like use some of our available cap space to add, like whatever it is, right? Something like that. I hope that's what happens because I think he deserves it. And also because I don't want to see him miss games. But I do think, like you said, because of the way his contract is structured, he should be willing to miss games if this is important enough to him. Like, I think it's totally fair that he's going to be able to say like, hey, you don't want to pay me what I'm worth. Let's see what it looks like when I'm not out there, that. And I think that's very possible because of the way the contract is structured.
Yeah, Shayne, let's hope they meet in the middle somewhere because I'm like you. I want to see this get resolved. I don't want to see him missing games. There's also a dual question here about Chris Boswell's contract. Right now, Boswell ranks outside of the top 10 kickers in the NFL, and that's kind of criminal based on especially the season he just had. He was the best kicker in the NFL last year in my mind, and so he does
have
Aubrey,
one of the two. It's kind of between
it was one of those two for sure. And he does have 2 years left under contract, but and oftentimes you wait until that last year. Man, it'd be hard not to give him a raise though, just for how clutch he has been. So we'll see if anything gets resolved. And based on talks, though, it sounds like the Steelers are content kind of going into the season the way that things are right now, if you listen to Omar Khan. But I don't know. I'm really on the fence whether something will get done with Boswell. It's not necessary technically because he has 2 years left on his deal.
That's the thing is like he definitely deserves, again, both these guys deserve more money, but they have years left on their contract. Like it puts them in a tough spot where I think with Bos, like it makes sense for him to try to make good on the value that he's brought to the team over the past couple of years, because outside of that one like weird year a few years ago, he's been just so phenomenal for this team for the entire time he's been here. And right now, the top of the kicker market's like $6.4 million a year. And I know it's kicker, but like
we're talking chump change compared to Cam Heyward,
right?
So like if they wanted to give him a raise, that they could easily.
It would be nothing. Yeah, it would be nothing. And that's one of the things. Like, and Grant, I know that I'm not in the position to make these decisions, but like, I don't understand why like team ownership and team GMs have to do this thing where it's like, I know you want like $2 million more, but we just simply can't do it. And I'm like, yes, you can. Yes, you can. You absolutely. You know this. The cap gymnastics teams will do to sign someone else's player to bring them in is incredible. So they will send money into 2050 if they have to. But the second a player for your own team is drastically outperforming their contract, and they're like, "Hey, you want to throw me something?" And they're like, "Sorry, can't find it. We're broke, unfortunately." It always cracks me up. I'm like, you just don't want to do it. Like, and I don't get it. Like, this is why the Eagles are the way they are. Yeah, but this is why the Eagles are so successful, because Lori, the owner there, will just be like, "Yeah, sure, we're gonna pay you exactly the amount of money you should probably make, because I'm just gonna put most of it into like 2030 when the cap is $1 billion and I don't have to worry about it." Like that's what they do, and everyone's happy that plays for them. That's what happens. So I don't know. It's frustrating.
Yeah, they certainly could get it done. They've got the capabilities to do so. Maybe it's more about not setting that precedent moving forward, and then every time somebody outplays the contract, they feel like, "Hey, you did it for him, and you did it for him." So
I do get it.
It might be one of those things. All right, let's move on from Cam and let's talk about Steelers. Training camp has wrapped up. If you got a chance to make it out there, drop a chat down here. I want to see what was your biggest takeaway from camp. Shayne, you nearly made it out there. We didn't get to this year. So Josh was our eyes over at camp. And it's now with camp in the books, Shayne, I want to kind of talk about the biggest performances, maybe some of the worst performances, not necessarily bad performances, but misfortune situations. So let's talk about the winners and losers from camp. And I want to start with the winners list here. And right at the top, I've got Darnell Washington, the only tight end essentially to not miss any time. He was excellent by pretty much everybody's account, still looking huge and jacked as ever. Yeah. I mean, he obviously had the amazing catch in the preseason game, but everybody is raving about Darnell Washington. And yet this is the team's third tight end. Like, you have to find a way to get this guy involved still. He is one of one in the NFL in terms of the size, athletic makeup that you're getting with soft hands. And that's a little clunky in his movements, of course, because he's a 300-pound tight end. That's what Alfredo Roberts said last year. The number starts with a 3. It's still looking like it does.
Doesn't look any smaller this year.
There's pictures going around, and I watched all 22. You freeze frame it when he's the inline tight end lined up to Broderick Jones. It's like, he's bigger. I mean,
find the tight end in this picture, and you're like, I don't see one.
Yes, I know. So he's enormous. But he also had a great camp by everybody's account here. Shayne, what do you think is going to happen with Darnell this season? Like, was it enough to sway the Steelers? Like, hey, get me more involved here.
At this point, the more I know the receivers played well in the game, right? The more I watch like this tight end group work, just be in like 13 personnel all the time. Like, just I don't care. Get everyone, get all these guys in the field. I don't care. Put Darnell Washington at X wide receiver and just throw a fade to him in the red zone. Because what do you like? What's the decision on who guards him in that situation? Like, what defensive player do you put on him? An edge rusher? Who else is big enough to defend him? Like, at this point, again, like, I understand you brought in Johnny Smith, you have Pat Freiermuth. He's technically the third tight end. He's really the second tight end, and then one of Jonnu and Pat's going to be like a slot player, whatever. They do have to figure out a way to get him on the field, because not only does it help your run game and the blocking scheme, it also helps the pass protection if you keep him in as a pass protector. Because, again, he could probably play tackle if you wanted him to. It would take him a little while to get used to that, but he could probably do it. He has the size for it. That's going to be a huge bonus for a guy like Aaron Rodgers that, again, needs pass protection, needs to be kept upright, and he needs an outlet who can kind of just, again, he could throw the ball up to, or in the flats. Like, we've seen what he can do when we throw him those little kind of like flat routes, and he would just get up the field because he runs fast in a straight line. He just can't really move laterally at all because, again, 300-pound tight end. There's a lot of ways to involve him, and I think you look at him in training camp, you look at what he did last year, you just have to find a way to do it. I don't know how they're going to do it. I don't know what the plan is, but I think they have to find a way to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited about him, and I don't get excited about tight end 3s often, Shayne.
I mean, how many teams can you do that for? So.
I mean, I don't want to compare him to Travis Hunter, but it's like, you talk about a guy that can play dual positions. He acts as a third offensive tackle on the field, or a tight end that can stream down the middle with some build-up speed and soft hands and a big box-out radius. Like, he's one of one in terms of what he brings to the table. Not to overhype him, I think he's going to get limited usage in the passing game, but if he's not out there as a receiver, you use him as a blocker. You gotta find a way to get this guy involved because he's been really impressive this summer. And I think he's still 23 years old. Like there's a lot to get excited about here. All right, Shane, another winner that I had was Y.A. Black, the SWAT team captain here, batting balls down by all the reporting out there. He's getting his hands up in those passing lanes, which you can do when you're 6'6" and have 35-inch arms and a 340-pound frame. But we saw it in the preseason. The flashes were there. People were talking about his performance in one-on-ones, the 11-on-11s at Steelers training camp. Like, I'm encouraged. Like, I did not think that I would be encouraged by this draft selection. In fact, out of all of them, besides Dante Kent, I was probably maybe least intrigued by Y.A. Black because he didn't test particularly well. His production was terrible at Iowa, and that's not really his game. He's the run defensive type. But what do you make of everything you see so far? Like, are you buying the Y.A. Black hype?
I think for the most part I am. And I think people have to remember, like, this is the range where he was drafted is where the majority of like some of the best run defenders in the NFL get drafted in the interior. Like, they are drafted there because they don't have the athletic traits. They don't have the pass rush upside. But what they can do is just be a rock in the middle of the defense. And when they do get one-on-ones, because of their immense size and power, they can, shed and make a play in the backfield, or even occasionally, get a bull rush going for the pass rush. But what his job is going to be, and what it's been, is to just be a menace and an obstacle for the offensive line to overcome. And when he can't get anything going, again, he gets his hands up. He's learning from the TJ Watts of the world and the Cam Heywards of the world to do a really good job of that. Like, he does look like a legitimate, like, rotational defensive lineman already as a 5th-round pick. And it happens more than I think people realize, but it's still impressive to see him play as well as he has so far.
Yeah, Shane, I think I was around OTAs, and I wrote an article on why he is a roster lock. And I feel more confident about that now than ever. They don't have that type of defender on their defensive line. Last year, their guys got moved. Montrevious Adams, Larry Ogunjobi. You talk about guys that reek at holding up at the point of attack. I think it's a relief that they moved on from some of those guys because they just can't operate and expect to have a successful defense. Y.A. Black can help change that. He's a legitimate guy that can come in early downs and two gap. He's a guy that can stop the run like we haven't seen in a while, outside of Cam Heyward, of course, who's always great at that. So I'm excited about him for sure. Another winner I have here is James Pierre. And it's not necessarily because he had some phenomenal training camp. He had good days. He had bad practices. He given up some big plays down the field. But for the sheer fact that Corey Trice can't stay healthy, there is a legitimate path to the roster again for James Pierre. And we know that he is a respectable gunner. That's where he does his best work on special teams. You don't want him to see the field on defense for you very often, not more than a few snaps at a time. No. But because Trice is perennially injured, James Pierre becomes an instant winner on the Steelers because I think that his chances of making the roster have skyrocketed.
Yeah, again, when you are a back end of the roster player and you're a really good special teamer, someone else has to either be able to replicate your special teams value, or they have to be too good for the backup defense to not have that guy make the roster. And right now, there's not many guys that fit that bill ahead of James Pierre. I mean, you hope that Trice can get healthy enough to continue to have a job here, but we both know how we feel about him. Both of us were very high on him in that draft class, and obviously the injuries is what's held him back both in college and in the pro so far. But there's no doubt that he's a better player than Pierre, especially on defense. But you have to be able to play games. Like you do. And that whole caveat of that whole cliche of best ability is availability. He is the definition of that type of situation where we've seen him play well, but we haven't seen him play much. And that's what matters more than anything else.
Yeah, for sure. I see we've got a few more chats in here. We'll get to those after this list here. But if you have more questions for us, drop them in the chat. We'll get to those here shortly. Another winner that I have, Shane, is Connor Heyward. And I think that especially recently, fans are coming down really hard on this guy. I think that he's had a good training camp, though. Aaron Rodgers has praised him for his soft, natural hands. He's just a smart football player. And I think Rodgers said something to the tune of smart football players are the best football players. I don't know how true that is. You still have to have some size and talent and athleticism, which Heyward doesn't have a ton of those things.
Nope.
But I mean, he is clearly in line for a roster spot. DJ Thomas Jones was waived injured. He was a guy that probably was the most threatening to take that because of his fullback versatility.
Yeah, versatility.
JJ Galbraith didn't have a particularly great training camp. He flashes as a receiver, has really struggled as a blocker. Heyward just knows what he's doing. He knew what he was doing from day one. He offers some special teams value. And even if we don't love the fact that he's out there, and quite frankly, unless the Steelers are running 0-4 personnel, I don't want to see him ever take the place of Darnell Washington because one player is just better than the other. But I give credit where credit is due. I think that Connor Heyward has had a pretty good summer again.
It's really tough with Connor Heyward because, like, it was really fun, like, when it first was a thing, because he made a couple plays as a rookie and, you know, he flashed some things, and then then you watch him out there and he just looks out of place, unfortunately. Like, he just kind of does. And
yeah,
I think, again, if he was a little bit more effective as a true, like, lead blocker as a fullback, I think I would have no problem at all with him being on the roster, because that's what he would be there to do then in that situation with his build and everything else. And again, he catches the ball well, like all that stuff, but I mean, come on, he's 5'11", like 230 pounds or whatever it is. Like, he's a running back build, but not really, and also not a tight end build. Like, he's a tweener in one of the weirdest ways you could be a tweener in the NFL, which is a like running back, tight end, H-back hybrid that doesn't have the burst and things like that you'd like to see, or the size. It's just tough. Like, he's going to make the roster very, very clearly. I think he's going to play some amount of snaps, but there's a reason he had like 6 touches last year, because he's not really an option in the passing game as much as maybe you'd hope he would be.
Yeah, Shayne. I mean, he's good in some facets, but the ceiling is so capped. I mean, the ceiling was capped the time that he got here and put on that practice jersey at 5'11" and change, 235. When you don't have great athletic traits, when you're not particularly strong, you don't have a big frame. It's like, at some point you would like to hope that the Steelers would use their resources on maybe a more talented player. But they keep 4 tight ends. This is our Arthur Smith offense. They're going to keep 4 tight ends. He's clearly in line to be that 4th. And like I said, I think that he did enough to impress Aaron Rodgers in camp. And so I'm taking his word for it, that he had that particularly strong enough camp again to stick around on the roster this year. Let's talk about Cole Holcomb for a second here. A guy who, to his credit, I mean, he stayed healthy, and this is his first action since halfway through the 2023 season, where he suffered that gruesome knee injury. Leg got buckled inside out. Friendly fire from, I think it was Quan Alexander. Finally back on the field, looking strong, looking healthy. Just had his first preseason game. Did a couple nice things there. 2 pass defenses in that game, but he's taking command of the defense. He wore that green dot this past game. He's a guy that is a winner for the sheer fact that he was able to go this whole 2025 training camp and not suffer any setbacks.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is like, he was a winner the second training camp ended and he was still healthy, right? Because when you come back from an injury like that at linebacker, where there's so much change of direction and you have to be able to react to things quickly and all the good stuff, it takes a long time to feel comfortable on a leg that was messed up as bad as his was, right? And the fact that he's just back and seems like a guy who's going to be part of the defense and can actually play a little bit still, that's huge for him. And I think it's huge for his career, because could he stick around for a couple more years now because of that? Probably. And that'll, give him more opportunities to make some more money and to potentially get some more playing time as a starter, maybe somewhere else, or maybe even here if something happens, right? So it's just really good to have him back as just now depth instead of having to lean on him as the top linebacker.
Yeah, for sure. That would be quite the comeback story. We're rooting for it to happen. And he's certainly in line for a roster spot, maybe a role on here as well. Let's go to another winner that I have, is Juan Thornhill. And again, you're talking about a guy that's a winner in the sense that the Steelers haven't replaced him. I think that he was probably thrilled to see that their safety signing was Chuck Clark and not a Justin Simmons or someone who potentially could have taken his place. Nothing against Chuck Clark. I think that Clark's going to be solid backup, but Thornhill has had a strong summer. He's had a good preseason game, didn't play very much in that first quarter, projected to be the starting free safety for this team in 2025. And that's pretty much all you could ask for, especially if you watched his film the last 2 years in Cleveland.
Yeah, again, his win is just that he's out there and still the starter up to this point, and he hasn't been replaced. And I think overall, like, he's been good in camp, and I think from what I've seen at least and heard, and he did have that really nice hit in the preseason game on Brian Thomas Jr. Like, that was an excellent play. It's the type of play on the ball that we haven't seen a lot over the past couple of years from the Steelers defense, especially the back end. So if he can just, again, he just has to be a good safety. He doesn't have to be old Minka Fitzpatrick. He doesn't have to be even as good as Deshaun Elliott, especially with what Elliott does at the line of scrimmage. Just don't blow plays. Like, don't be the reason why we give up a 70-yard touchdown in a gotta-have-it situation on defense. Like, that's really all I think they're asking him to do. And so far, it seems like he's been able to hold up in that regard.
All right, Shane, another winner I have is Aaron Rodgers. I don't think that he didn't do anything particularly impressive. I mean, everything was pretty chalk, pretty vanilla. But when you're a 41-year-old, again, you can make it through camp when all you had recently was just a bag of ice on your leg. I mean, he made it through camp. He's healthy. He is building connection with his wide receivers. And so that's about as well as you could ask for from someone in his position at his age.
Yeah, again, when you have a 40-plus-year-old quarterback, you just want them to be healthy, to be able to practice enough, especially when they're new to your team. You don't want him to have to sit out a bunch and not be able to kind of get in line with these guys and make sure that they know what he wants, what he's expecting from them. So far, so good on that. And he did also mention that he'd be totally willing to play in the preseason. We'll see if that actually happens. Mike kind of made it sound like it's not, but we'll get to that. But again, if he's even willing to do that, that tells you that he's definitely feeling pretty good, probably. So.
All right, Shane, just a couple more winners here. I have Peyton Wilson, a guy who somehow seems to see the play developing like 2 seconds before it happens. Like, I'm really impressed with what I've seen from him. All the buzz surrounding him. He knows the talent that he has too, because he's been asked about it by the media recently. And he said, like, I want to be the best coverage linebacker in the league. He thinks he can be one of the best linebackers in the league. And I don't doubt it. The guy is 6'4", 240, runs a 4.43, incredible instincts, had amazing production at NC State. He's in year 2 now. He's healthy. I don't care if he's playing without an ACL. It doesn't show. So as long as he can stay healthy and not have any major injuries like he's had in the past, I mean, the sky is the limit, I think, for what he can do this year.
Yeah, he's just really impressive to watch out there because he just moves different. And I think that's one of the things, like, if you're someone who's watching football or you're relatively new to it, or if you want to get into scouting, like, look for the guys who just move different than everyone else, and you're probably on the right track as far as he's pretty good, especially if they're also making plays on top of that, right? Because you could argue Patrick Queen moves different than everyone else, just sometimes he moves in the wrong direction, which is a whole other thing. But with Peyton Wilson, like, again, you said, because he does have good diagnostics, especially in coverage, and the speed, he just seems to get places faster than everyone else does. And that's the key thing as linebackers. If you can read and react to things and you have the speed, it does make it hard on offenses to attack the middle of the field, which is what a lot of the best offenses in the league want to do. So if he can help the Steelers prevent that from happening as often this year and continue to grow in that role, we're going to have one of the best linebacker groups in the league, even if Queen doesn't get better from what he was last year.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I've got one more winner here, Shane, and that's Scotty Miller, the longtime veteran wide receiver. His best days are behind him at this point. He's not a roster lock by any means for the Pittsburgh Steelers, but he showed a lot of chemistry with Aaron Rodgers, and maybe that's enough to stick around. He was consistent, made some plays down the field. He followed up that strong training camp with a good first preseason game this year for the Steelers, and so I have him as a winner.
Yeah, and he's just a guy that's always been limited kind of by physical limitations in terms of size and strength, but he's always been a fast player. He's always been someone who's quick. Like, again, there's a way to use him in an offense. I just think that it's not a big enough role where he is a roster lock or he's going to play enough where they have to keep him around, especially because he isn't really a special teamer at all. But if they need someone who can separate quickly and play in the slot and they want to have a backup role for that, there's a guy we're going to talk about in a minute here who they thought was going to be that, and honestly, Scotty Miller might be a better version of that at this point in their career. So we'll see about that.
Yeah, yeah. And Shayne, for what it's worth, Scotty Miller was on the team last year and played too many snaps because the production was incredibly. I think he played over 20% of the snaps and barely had any production. Like when you were out there, you're taking up a spot on the team. You need to be doing something.
He's not out there to block.
His fault. So. But I think that for him to make the roster, I think that it's not impossible at all. But I think that Rodgers might have to go to bat for him a little bit and say,
I like this guy.
Yeah, I kind of want this guy. I like the chemistry we've built here. But I think he had a good training camp nonetheless. Let's get to the loser side of things now. I don't like calling these guys losers. They're still professional football players. But I got to start with Corey Trice Jr. And Shayne, I've been as bullish on Trice as anybody out there. I think I'll make a bold statement. I think the talent alone is every bit on par with Joey Porter Jr., if not more, because the guy is more fluid in the hips and has better ball skills. This seems really bold for a 7th round pick, but this is a guy that would have been drafted, I think, in the 2nd round had it not been for the extensive injury history, season-ending ankle injury, season-ending ACL. What happened during his first training camp? Blew out his ACL. What happened last year after he was looking awesome in the first couple of games of the season? Was it week 3 against the Chargers? Tears his hammy and misses 11 games after that. He's made of glass, and I love Trice. He just can't stay healthy. You've talked about that already. The best ability is availability. He does not have availability, and this might be the last straw for him, Shayne, because this is 3 years in a row now the Steelers have had to put up with injuries and work around him because of it.
It's just really unfortunate because there's a lot of guys who I think people don't realize sometimes the stress that's put on the body to be as big and athletic as these guys are in the NFL. That's why you have a lot of non-contact injuries. That's why you have a lot of soft tissue injuries, because bodies just aren't meant to move the way some of these guys move sometimes. And unless you are a true freak, and I think in some ways he is from an athletic standpoint, but if your body just doesn't have the durability and it can't handle these movements as well, you're just never going to really work out. And that's kind of, again, why he was drafted as late, because teams would have eventually taken a chance on him because of the talent, and the Steelers did. But it was well known that this was possible for his career where he just wasn't going to play enough games. And like I look at a guy like Adrian Peterson when he tore his knee up and was then immediately like the best running back we've ever seen the next year. Some guys are just built different, right? Sometimes they're built different in the sense that they can recover from and handle just way more than other guys can, even if they aren't necessarily that much more athletic or whatever else. It's just their bodies are more built for it. Corey, unfortunately, just doesn't have the durability factor with that.
Yeah, and man, when he's at his best, you're talking about a corner that's 6'3", 206 pounds, nearly 33-inch arms, the hip fluidity of a guy that's like 5'11", like he's got soft hands. Like there's so much to get excited about with him, but there's a reason he went in the 7th round, and the NFL is showing you exactly why he did not pass those medical checks. He nearly went undrafted because the guy just can't stay on the field, and I feel bad for him. But it's looking grim, to say the least, for Corey Trice right now. This hamstring injury doesn't look good either, and I think that he may have to find a way to suit up for that 3rd preseason game, or that might be it. I just don't know where the team goes from here. Not going to be available this week for sure, but hopefully he can get back out there soon. Maybe the team will try to stash him on IR, but you put him on IR before final roster cut downs, you are done for the season. And so there's some finagling that has to work there if they even want to try to mess with this. And what's unfortunate, Shayne, is I think that this is a guy that if he had stayed healthy all this summer, guaranteed to be the 4th corner on the team. Like this is the guy that he's the dime back. He's the starting dime backer for you when you're in dime. He could be a nickel cornerback. He can be a boundary cornerback. He's the first guy off the bench after the top 3 in nickel if somebody goes down. Now all those things are in jeopardy, and it's because of his health, and it's unfortunate. All right, Shayne, I've got another loser on the list here, and that's Robert Woods, a 33-year-old veteran wide receiver. I was not optimistic about this signing. I made that very, very clear. He hasn't done anything in several years now. I thought that he was completely non-existent on the Texans last year. I wasn't in favor of going the same route this team seems to go like 3 years in a row now. Allen Robinson and Mike Williams trade and Van Jefferson. Like, can we get past the there's a reason these guys are becoming available to you. Robert Woods, I feel like, is very much in the same wheelhouse. He didn't impress me during training camp this year. I didn't hear a lot of positive reports, kind of just hidden in the background. Much was the case of him in his first preseason game when I think he played 23 snaps and had 4 receiving yards off of one
catch, like
reception.
4 yards. Yeah.
There's just no reason to keep this guy around. He doesn't play special teams, at least not at a high level. He was forced to play some last year for Houston, but collectively, like over the last 6 years, has barely played special teams. And so I just don't have a lot of interest. So he hits my losers list here.
Yeah, again, not much to say with him. Unfortunately, the days of Bobby Trees being a great receiver has long since passed him. As fun as he was with the Rams in particular, I think he's one of the better number 2s in the league for several years. Just, again, he's in his 30s, doesn't have the juice anymore, doesn't have the explosiveness. So this is what happens.
All right, Shayne, I have Will Howard on the losers list too. I think that Howard had a pretty solid summer from by most beat reporters' accounts, by most who were in attendance, but he lands on the losers list because he broke that pinky finger, and it's forcing him to miss the whole preseason. And now there's already talks with Skylar Thompson, the way that he's performing. What do you try to do with this guy? Do you just put him on season-ending IR and hope that you don't have to get to a third quarterback situation here? Do you start the season with 4 quarterbacks and then you stash him IR eligible to return? Either way, he missed a big opportunity to showcase his talents in the preseason. And it goes more than just beyond this year, Shayne. We're looking ahead to next year's draft. Like, maybe there was a chance that if Howard was so impressive, the Steelers could have maybe held off on finding their franchise quarterback for one more year if they weren't absolutely in love with the players next year. Now it feels like, all right, we didn't get to watch any of Howard in the preseason. Obviously, they get to see him at practice, and they view that as more important. But for fans, at least as well, like, we wanted to see this guy out there, didn't get to see that. And now we don't know what his early career is going to look like, but we know that an injury that forces you to miss your entire rookie season, preseason, is always bad.
Yeah, again, I just wanted to see him play, and I think that's the biggest thing for him is he's not going to get a chance to play real reps in the NFL until at least next year, and that's being generous. Like, I don't see any scenario, barring like obviously catastrophic injury, where he sees the field at all this year in any meaningful way. Now that he's not going to be playing, it seems like, at least in the preseason. And again, he's a loser for that reason. It's not really because of his play. I think he clearly was going to be the QB3 for this team had he been healthy. And I still, a little bit of a spoiler, but for something we'll talk about later, I still think he probably will be in some capacity if he's healthy enough. But it's just, again, it's tough not to get a chance to play for the first time in the NFL.
All right, Shayne, I've only got 2 more on the list here. DeMarvin Leal, it wasn't that he had a really bad camp. It's just, where do you fit this guy in anymore? We're in year 4 now. There's just no room for you. I'm sorry. You were never a good fit to begin with. Kind of an awkward build. You're too slow to be an edge. You're not strong enough to be an IDL full-time. The Steelers drafted Jack Sawyer in the 4th round. He's going to be that 4th edge this year. Really bad news. Doubly bad news was they doubled up on the defensive line with Harmon and Black. And so a guy that, the one thing he had going for him was that position flexibility to kind of slide along anywhere. Didn't do anything particularly well, but could at least do that. Now there's guys that do everything better than you, and the Steelers have the depth. And so it's like, you are on the way out. And I think that if we had more time, Shayne, we could talk about players the Steelers should try to trade for a late round pick or a pick swap. He's at the top of the list here of those guys because he's just not going to make it.
No, and I think, honestly, my prediction at this point is that he's going to get cut, and then the Bears are going to sign him to their practice squad, because if there's anything Dennis Allen likes, it's oversized edge rushers who can't actually rush the passer. So
that's a worthwhile prediction there.
Yeah. We'll
Shayne, I've got one more here. That's Calvin Austin. I think that Austin started pretty strong.
Yeah.
Still the team's wide receiver too, and so we're not blowing this out of proportion here, but kind of like Trice, I mean, you got to be able to stay on the football field. Now Roman Wilson's starting to heat up a little bit here. He's the one that's starting to gain the chemistry with the quarterback. Calvin Austin has not had that over the last stretch of training camp, and now the training camp is closed. Aaron Rodgers is a new quarterback. Obviously, you want to be able to get all of those reps. You're already at a severe size disadvantage when you're 5'7" 3/4", 170 pounds. So he might be weeded out eventually if Roman Wilson can improve. If the Steelers go out and find another wide receiver, you don't want anything pointing back to you and saying, well, this guy can't stay on the field or he doesn't have the chemistry with Rodgers. And so I put him on the losers list for that. Not that he had a bad camp, but for those reasons.
Yeah, and this is another example of just missing time and a really tough time to miss time, right? Like where you want to build that chemistry up before the season gets started. And he'll have time to do that still in regular practices throughout. But it's just, again, you don't want to see a guy that's, already had missed his entire rookie season with an injury. And, that's obviously set him back a little bit. He's going into a contract year. So he obviously wants to show out. And even if it's not for the Steelers, get another deal somewhere else. So we'll see what happens with him. But I think if he can get back healthy, he should be okay.
All right. That brings us to the end of our winners losers list, Shayne. But I also want to get to a couple of the chats here before we move on to our next segment real quick. And we'll probably run a long show today. But I've got, let's see. Let's go with this one. Any chance Sky can challenge Howard for the third quarterback role? Skylar Thompson. Yeah, there's absolutely a chance, because if Howard is not healthy this year, a little spoiler from my 53-man roster prediction, my latest one, I have the Steelers keeping 4 quarterbacks, getting Howard on the team initially, and then stashing him on IR eligible to return. That would make Skylar Thompson the third quarterback on the team. I also think it's possible the Steelers could maybe play up Howard and say, is anybody out there desperate for a quarterback? New Orleans, I see you. Like, is there anybody that wants? He's got a little bit of a starting experience. He's playing well so far in the preseason. So maybe they try to swap him out if they think that Howard is healthy enough to go as QB3. But yes, there's absolutely a path for Thompson to be the QB3 to start the season, I believe.
Yeah, if it's a health reason is what it would be most likely, is if Howard's healthy by the time week 1 rolls around, which I think that's possible with him from what I can tell, then I think it probably is him, but we'll talk more about that a little bit.
Yeah. By no means is he a roster lock, even with the performance he's coming off of right now. A lot of it hinges on Howard's health. Are we satisfied with the wide receiver room? Ken asks. Satisfied is a big word. I wouldn't say satisfied with it in a year where it's kind of like a must-have, where you really, really need to compete for playoff success. But is it better than some of the alternatives, like going out and getting a Gabe Davis and trying to do the stopgap things you've been doing? I didn't want to go that route again. I really didn't. Like, Roman Wilson, you're either this guy or you're not, and we're going to find that out. And at that point, maybe you can go out and trade for a guy. Maybe you can sign Odell Beckham, a washed up receiver, and resort to whatever. Yeah. But I don't want to go with another low upside play, the Van Jefferson, the Allen Robinson, the Mike Williams trade, like that kind of stuff. Doesn't intrigue me at all. Gabe Davis is in that wheelhouse after his failed physicals, the season he's coming off with the Jaguars. I think they kind of just need to make it work. DK hopefully is a actual number 1 receiver for you. And then if Roman Wilson and Calvin Austin can be wide receiver 3s, that might be enough with the 3 tight ends that you have.
Yeah, like saying I'm satisfied is a strong word, but I think I'm pleasantly surprised up to this point with how the receiver room is played, especially the first preseason action where, again, guys up and down the depth chart were making plays for Skylar Thompson and Mason Rudolph. Like, they looked totally fine. Now, again, once we get into real games that count, am I expecting this receiver room to be like the best part of the offense? No. But I think that they can be capable enough in an offense that's not really trying to run itself through the receiver core, especially beyond DK Metcalf.
All right, Shayne, one more question here from Ken. Thoughts on Arthur Smith's offense? Pretty vanilla so far. Like, he's not going to show his whole hand in the preseason. I think the biggest kind of takeaway, if you will, from training camp is that he ran a little bit of that 0-4 personnel. That is 0 wide receivers and 4 tight ends on the field at a time. Shayne, tell me if I'm wrong, but what on earth is the incentive of putting Connor Heyward on the field when you can have Metcalf on the field, or you can have a Caleb Johnson, Jalen Warren? Like, I don't get it, but at least he's trying something different here.
I don't know. It's funny. I'll say what I've always said about Arthur Smith since he's been here. I think he is like somewhere between the 24th and 18th best offensive coordinator in the NFL. And he's at the very bottom end of the Shanahan-y type tree of, like, he's going to run wide zone, he's going to run play action, he's going to run tight formations and run a lot of 2 tight end sets. Like, he's going to do all that stuff. He just doesn't do it as well as the guys who are head coaches doing those things, right? And that have proliferated the league. I think he's fine. I don't expect him to reinvent the wheel. I think the offense will be very similar to last year, just with better players overall in it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if we're comparing him to recent Steelers OCs, like way more optimistic than Matt Canada and Randy Fichtner.
Yeah, I mean, when you're at the bottom of the barrel, anything above that feels pretty good. So.
He's not going to be Todd Haley though either. So, that is my thoughts on that. All right, if you're a fan of the Pittsburgh Steelers and would like to support the Steel Curtain podcast, please consider subscribing to the Steel Curtain podcast on YouTube. We appreciate all of your support. Thanks for the chats in here. Please leave us some more. Hit that like button if you would. Leave us a comment down below. We want this to be seen by as many Steelers fans as possible, as Shane and I and Josh on Mondays bring you as much coverage as possible. All right, Shane. This last section we'll try to go through relatively quickly here, but we are looking for what to watch in Pittsburgh's second preseason game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which will take place at 7 p.m. Eastern time on Saturday, Shane. And the first thing that I have here is, are we going to get our first look at Aaron Rodgers? As of now, as of this recording, we have not heard whether Rodgers will play in this game, but if he does, we obviously can assume it's going to be very sparingly, maybe a series or two. And what will that look like? Like, who is he going to target? It's just, those are some of the things to look for. How is the chemistry looking? Is he going to be off page with any of his wide receivers, which you certainly hope that he's not? Is he going to stay well protected? Is he going to get the ball out extremely fast like he did last year with the New York Jets? Like, those are some of the things that I'll be looking for if Aaron Rodgers suits up in this game.
So I am very curious if he plays at all, because I think he said that he would play if asked to. I think he probably kind of wants to play a little bit, honestly, it sounds like. I don't think he would have said that otherwise. I think Tomlin obviously kind of threw some cold water on that, was like, I don't know if I'm going to do that. But if he does play, I do think I know how it's going to go, personally. I think they're going to run the ball on the first play with him. They're going to get whatever amount of yardage. They're going to throw a screen to someone on the next play. And then if it's third down, they're going to try to throw a back shoulder fade to DK. And then it's either going to work or it won't.
They're not going to risk injury with
that's my prediction. I think it's going to be a very quick situation, and that's it. And it either works or it doesn't. But again, it'll be interesting to see him play if he does. That's all I'll say about that.
All right, Shane, let's move on from Rodgers then. Can Skylar Thompson repeat? And I think that's a tough task when you're talking about quarterback that went 20 of 28, 230 yards, 3 touchdowns. I don't know if you can repeat that performance, but could he do, I want to say it this way, could he do enough to maintain the impressive play to the point where he becomes potentially an intriguing trade candidate as like a day 3 pick swap with a team?
Yes, that's the most important thing, I think, for him. Is I think unless Howard is truly not healthy enough to make the roster initially and actually be the reserve quarterback, the inactive quarterback, I don't think Thompson is going to make this team as a third quarterback unless that's the situation, unless it's like a caveat situation. Because it doesn't make sense to not have Will Howard be the third quarterback when he's on a rookie contract. If you practice squad him, someone's probably going to scoop him off the practice squad from you. Like, it makes way more sense for him to be the third quarterback if he can be the third quarterback right away. But Thompson can do enough to entice another team to say, hey, like, we really don't like our backup quarterback option. We don't like what's going on here. Even maybe the third quarterback, like we talked about. Is that enough to give a draft pickup? I don't know. It obviously, you'd probably be looking at like a late round pick swap, but hey, if it's a team that really needs a quarterback badly, they're probably not good. So you might get a little value on like a 7th round pick swap. That's what he's playing for, I think, is to try to really impress other teams and see if they would want to come and pick him up in some fashion.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's certainly a scenario if the Steelers have to cut Skylar Thompson, he gets scooped up by another team to be their QB3, because you could certainly do worse as a QB3. The question is, can you get something out of him maybe at this point if the Steelers aren't going to do that strategy of trying to keep 4, stash Howard on IR eligible to return, which just makes the whole situation a little bit messier there. All right, another storyline we're looking out for. Will Roman Wilson be able to build on his solid preseason debut? And by the way, Wilson was injured last year. Remember, he in the first padded practice of training camp suffered a high ankle sprain. The guy was out essentially until midseason, played 5 snaps, hurt his hamstring. I mean, he's essentially had that redshirt rookie season. Now we're seeing kind of our first action of Roman Wilson. Can he build on that? Obviously, it wasn't high volume, just 2 catches for 24 yards, but was efficient, had a nice play on Tyson Campbell. Do you think that he's going to add to that performance?
I think so, 'cause I don't know how much DK will play if he does play, but I can't imagine it's much. And I think if Austin isn't fully healthy or is still nursing some things, he might not play much either. He could be the de facto number 1 for a good chunk of this game, depending on how much they want to leave the rest of the starters out there. And if he can just honestly, I just want to see him win routes, like win his matchups. I want to, like, even if he doesn't get the football, I just want to see him get open consistently, give himself, give the quarterback a good target for himself. Like, just that type of stuff is what you want to see in these preseason reps. The production matters to some degree, but it's more so, what does this guy actually look like? That's why when I talked about Skylar Thompson, I did an article about his performance. The numbers are great, but the way he looked in that game from start to finish was the more impressive part, because he struggled in a lot of ways, as like being able to handle the pocket and manage pressure. Much better with that in the first preseason game for the Steelers. So that's what we're going to be looking for with Wilson here.
Yeah, and he played just the 1 series last week. I have to imagine that in week 2 of the preseason, he's going to play definitely more than that, and hopefully get a little bit more volume as well, too. All right, Shayne, another storyline I'm looking out for. Can Broderick Jones repeat a solid performance in back-to-back weeks? Is this something that he's ever been able to do? Because, and again, the biggest thing with Jones, he has his moments, he's got his flashes, like you can see the tools and traits there. But I don't know if he's gone 2 straight games before without having like an egregiously sloppy play. So we're kind of seeing if this will be that
something. Yeah. Broderick, he needs to stack performances in a row. He just does. And from what I've heard, the last few practices have been very good for him. Like, he seems to be settling in. And again, we have to think about this. He is switching back to the left side, unfortunately, in a lot of ways. It is probably going to take him some time to get comfortable. Like, he looked real rough to start training camp. And I think there's an expectation of that when you're doing that. But he looked good in the preseason game. He's looked good in practice recently. He just has to keep stacking good performances, just get a rhythm, because in his defense, he just hasn't been given the chance to get into a rhythm in a lot of ways. So.
Yeah, and maybe this will be a confidence builder if he can do that on Saturday. All right, Shayne, will Y.A. Black outshine Derek Harmon? And I say again, not that Harmon was bad, but man, Black was the guy who got to exit the contest earlier, get the pat on the back, and watch from the sidelines because it was a job well done. Can he do it a second week in a row?
I think he could. I think the big thing, like with the reason why the snap count the way that it was, we talked about this earlier, is we know at this point, I think the Steelers know exactly what Black brings to the table. Like, he's going to be that run stopper. He's going to be one of the first guys off the bench. He's going to help with them on first and second down. With Harmon, like, he is still a young player, a guy that doesn't have a ton of experience playing as a true, like, pass rushing interior player. He was more of a nose at Michigan State before he went to Oregon last season. So he's still figuring that type of stuff out. I think he needs more reps, frankly, to get ready. Even if he is already considered a starter, there's just more for him to figure out, more for him to learn than I think a guy like Black, whose role is much more specific.
Yeah, and Shayne, I do want to mention real quick, I didn't chart all the alignments, but I don't recall a single snap that Black and Harmon played on the field together, because they were both playing when they were nickel, they were kind of in that 3-tech position. And when they were in base, they both played that left end position. So I would like to see them on the field together. I mean, why could you not play Harmon at 3-tech and Black at 1-tech like that? To me, that feels perfect, especially for a preseason game. So we'll see if we find any of that on Saturday night as well. All right, Shayne, can Caleb Johnson bounce back from an otherwise kind of sluggish start to his professional career in the preseason? Again, those 8 carries for 20 yards, really bad yards per carry, wasn't all his fault. Not a lot of running lanes, did have the drop in that game. Can we see him bust one out here? Maybe like show us that breakaway speed that once you get out in space.
I would really like to see the opportunity for him to get into open space and see what he looks like against, mostly other NFL athletes, right? Because I want to see him get some work with the first team again. I don't know at this point what to expect with Jaylen Warren's touches and whether he'll do much, because, again, we know what he's about. And with running backs, do you want to get them a ton of touches in the preseason? Not really. But assuming he gets some reps with the ones and they can actually give him legitimate blocking, I am curious, like, what happens if he gets in the open field, because he almost broke one with that 8-yard run where he couldn't quite get that second broken tackle. But Like if he can get in a straight line and like get the build up speed, I do want to see what that looks like against NFL competition.
All right, Shayne, can Jack Sawyer improve the pass rush? Because I thought that the hustle was good. He did some solid things in run defense, but the pressures that he was credited with, they came too late. Like he has got to be able to find quicker ways to win. Do you think that it's going to happen? I know that we've watched a lot of this guy at Ohio State.
No, I don't think personally. I think Sawyer is what he is. I think he's a very tough player. I think he's very much like I said, a hustle player. You talked about the hustle was good. The run defense was good. He is the quintessential like fourth edge rusher who you don't really want to see out there on pass downs.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that assessment based on this game. I was a little bit more optimistic than you, Shayne, but they were late wins in the rep, if you can call them that. Hopefully we see at least a little bit more juice here. And the last question that I have, last thing to watch, who will stand out at backup cornerback? Because this is the deepest group on the team, in my opinion. I think it's the one that's the most jumbled at the back end of the roster. Obviously, there's a huge opportunity for somebody with Corey Trice's hamstring injury. Is that going to be James Pierre? Is it going to be Beanie Bishop? Who do you think? Is there a name that comes to mind or someone that you're looking for in particular in this game?
I want to see more Brandon Eccles because he looked very good in the first preseason game.
Yeah.
And Beanie Bishop also very good in the first preseason game. Like he was sticky in coverage, was always around the ball. Like I think both of those guys in particular, those are the two guys I think have the best chance because Trice is out and because of the injuries with him, have the best chance of being actual like cornerback depth for this team, especially Bishop in the slot and then Eccles kind of all over the place. They looked really good. Like Eccles had a really nice pass breakup where he was able to fade back and knock the ball away. Like he has the juice. We know he's a fast player. He's an athletic player. That's what I'm looking for with that group is can those guys solidify themselves as like CB4 and 5 with Trice missing time.
Yeah, if Eccles can stack performances, that would be good because he might end up having to be that dime backer for the Steelers this year. And he's the veteran. He's got some experience, and he definitely looked impressive in that first game. All right, Shayne, we are going to be covering the game on Saturday night, so make sure you're over at stillcurtain.com for the latest news, updates, opinions, analysis. We go live on this show every single Wednesday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern time. Also check out Josh Yorish's show. He goes live on Mondays at 1:30 p.m. Thank you for joining us on the show today. You can follow Shayne on Twitter at Shayne Kubas. You can follow me on Twitter at Tommy Jaggi. You can download the Still Curtain podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Also check us out on YouTube or ask Alexa to play the Still Curtain Steelers podcast. And thanks again for listening to the Still Curtain podcast.